Its flames don't physically burn its opponents, but rather their spirits, which it then absorbs for itself. Because of course, what's Pokemon without a little dose of the macabre? On a brighter note, Chandelure also had a starring role on the popular sitcom Friends as the sarcastic member of the group from 1994 to 2004. Today, we'll examine how Chandelure fared in the competitive scene, with its occult blazes and wisecracks alike. So, how good was Chandelure actually? And in this video, we'll be going over these competitive formats. On day one of its debut generation, Chandelure was instantly the most feared Pokemon around because its hidden ability from the Dream World was none other than the ridiculously fearsome Shadow Tag, an ability so potent that it put Wynot in Ubers. Now just imagine what it could do on a Pokemon with a special attack stat rivaling Kyogre's. Most players demanded Shadow Tag Chandelure banned as soon as it was released. Scarf sets trapped and revenge killed just about everything, and it wasn't reasonable to force everything to run Shed Shell, or to force every defensive Pokemon to run an anti-Chandelure move, just so Chandelure couldn't get a substitute and 6 Calm Minds on them. This level of trapping was seen as uncompetitive. At the time, the Dream World metagame wasn't official, but had a decent amount of players on its ladder, and Chandelure was at the top of it. It was so good that it even dominated Dream World Ubers. The mighty Lugia being forced to run Shed Shell was a testament to its impact on the metagame. However, throughout the entire generation, Shadow Tag Chandelure was never actually released. Without it, Chandelure was not a bad Pokemon, but it certainly had a tough time in OU, what with being slower than just about every offensive Pokemon and being weak to all the Earthquakes on Sand teams and Water moves on Rain teams. Resistance-wise, its fire immunity it had from Flash Fire didn't do much against Sun teams because those packed Dugtrio, and its fighting immunity meant zilch because all the fighting types destroyed it anyway. Some players saw success with a set of Substitute, Shadow Ball, Fire Blast, and Hidden Power Fighting, which scared out Ferrothorn and Skarmory and safely smacked Tyranitar, but overall Chandelure just couldn't keep up with the metagame. It was too slow and got hit hard from every angle. So to UU it went. As odd as it may have seemed to have a Pokemon with such a high special attack stat in the tier, Chandelure fit in just fine, at least at first. Its fighting immunity was incredibly useful given how dominant fighting types such as Mienshao were, and it resisted Heracross's secondary stab in Megahorn to boot. Its fire immunity was also amazing in thwarting the otherwise nuclear Victini's V-Create. These useful resistances and immunities in conjunction with its solid speed tier, getting the jump on offensive staples like Nidoqueen, meant Chandelure got plenty of opportunity to fire off its attacks, pun intended. Having a secondary stab meant that even the waters that resisted Fire Blast weren't safe, as Chandelure could spam Shadow Ball to hit them, as well as Rhyperior incredibly hard. And in a one-on-one, it could even up the ante with an Energy Ball that completely blew Rhyperior and Swampert away. And even with the exception of Empoleon may have resisted Shadow Ball, but since it was half steel, it meant it didn't resist Fire Blast to begin with, and even Sharpedo, who technically resisted both moves, was so frail that it didn't actually count. Chandelure was impossible to safely wall, outside of Snorlax and Porygon 2. Luckily, Snorlax was one of the best Pokemon in the tier, so this wasn't much of a problem. That is, until Chandelure began using a bulkier set with Will-O-Wisp, Taunt, and sometimes even Pain Split or Substitute, which absolutely ruined both Lax and Porygon 2, and was essentially impossible to answer safely with other Pokemon like Rhyperior or Bulky Water. This put Chandelure over the line in many players' eyes. It was already immensely difficult to answer even in spite of its Stealth Rock weakness, and this was just too much. So at the very end of the generation, Chandelure was banned from UU, considered too good for it, but not yet quite OU status, resulting in its placement to BL.
Get a lioness on the ground.
She inserts a team, and then we have a capture kill option.
I build a plan, and I run it! Me.
Lioness, new season now streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus.
Chandelure's typing is a double-edged sword in VGC. See what I did there? On the one hand, it's weak to almost every relevant spread move, including Earthquake, Rock Slide, and Surf. But on the other hand, Chandelure has functional triple immunities to Fire, Normal, and Fighting, letting it sometimes get free switches in. Although 2011 was so lacking in fire types other than Chandelure that it would sometimes run Flame Body, another great ability that could swing entire games with a bit of luck. Chandelure's typing also brought powerful boons in their own rights. On the fire side, Chandelure brings the strongest heat waves in the game to the field, threatening massive damage to the enemy side if they can't handle it. Despite its mediocre bulk, Chandelure was able to find switches somewhat easily due to its functional 3 immunities, and just like in singles, Choice Scarf could patch up Chandelure's spread issues, making it an offensive powerhouse capable of creating inescapable pins. However, it's Chandelure's ghost typing that really defines it. Chandelure was an especially awkward speed tier of base 80, but if spec'd to be minimum speed, it is both an excellent user and abuser of Trick Room and doubles, as it's able to phase through opposing fakeouts to twist the dimensions and then fire off the most powerful heat waves known to man. In these cases, Chandelure would often be paired with Hitmontop and carry a Focus Sash, relying on fakeout support and its one-time survival item to ensure Trick Room would go off. Hitmontop or other fighting types such as Hariyama also dealt with the dark and rock types Chandelure hated, especially the dreaded Tyranitar. This setter variant liked to support other middling or low-speed Pokemon with good offensive presence, such as Conkeldurr and especially Scrafty. Of course, Chandelure also appreciated support of its own because it was so susceptible to being shattered. Amoonguss was a great redirector with Rage Powder that could ward off wayward Samurott Aqua Jets and also attracted the rare fire moves that Chandelure could take advantage of. However, Chandelure's ghost typing isn't just useful when setting up Trick Room. It's also paramount when attempting to stop the speeds from getting swapped. Chandelure's ability to dodge fakeout goes both ways, letting it ignore the Hitmontops or other fakeout users on the other side of the field. And that awkward base 80 speed meant that against hard Trick Room, Chandelure could still outspeed the opposing sweepers. So who's awkward now, huh? Since Trick Room setters commonly are ghost types just like Chandelure, it's able to abuse Ghost's self-weakness and the highest special attack in the format to evaporate whatever spirit might be trying to set up Trick Room on the other side, be it Dusclops opposing Chandelure or Jellicent. Even if the opponent wasn't using a ghost type, other Trick Room setters, like Reuniclus, were usually still weak to ghosts. Since those mons would be trying to set up Trick Room, you could pretty much count on them being slower than Chandelure itself if it had any speed investment, leaving them facing down a hugely powerful Shadow Ball. However, not even Chandelure could break through the menace that is Eviolite Dusclops or a bulky Jellicent without a little help. As such, many Chandelure would run Ghost Gem, giving their Shadow Ball a little bit of extra oomph to eliminate whatever setter was on the other side. Even then, it wasn't always possible to dispose of Dusclops reliably, but Chandelure had one more trick up its sleeve: Imprison. Imprison Ghost Gem Chandelure may be focused on one thing, but boy does it do it well. With both offensive and supportive threats to stop Trick Room, Chandelure was easily the best anti-Trick Room mon in the game. While there were plenty of Choice Scarf Chandelures in 2011 looking to mostly utilize its firepower, it was actually in its capacity as Trick Room's biggest foe that it prospered most. Jonathan Hiller used Focus Sash Imprison Chandelure to win the Newark Regionals in the senior division, also opting to swap out Heat Wave for Overheat to ensure it could do as much damage as possible. Aaron's Cybertron Zhang also used a Focus Sash build to win the US Nationals in the seniors division, pairing it with Jellicent as another Trick Room mon turned anti-Trick Room. Chandelure even had success on the world stage, where Matt and Fuego Coil used it alongside his Rogue Samurott pick to place third place. Matt opted to run the Ghost Gem variant to blow away opposing Trick Room, a fact Wolf Glick recounts as having sent his Coffagrigus back to the underworld. Chandelure's popularity as a Trick Room counter continued in 2012, with several players using it when they needed to defeat slower teams, including Tony Chinese dude Chiang. It also was a strong counter to the rash of Sun teams that became available with the shift to national decks and the emergence of Ninetales, although it was nearly useless against rain teams, aside from possibly blowing back enemy Scizors. However, Chandelure ended up prospering most in a weather you wouldn't normally associate with it: Hail. 2012 saw the emergence of the Hail Room archetype, which used Blizzard spam from the likes of Abomasnow and Gastrodon to overwhelm the opponent once Trick Room was set up. Chandelure, despite its lack of synergy with Hail itself, was a powerful pick in these teams for its ability to bait out and punish opposing fire and fighting type Pokemon who would prey on the ice types and Amoonguss' redirection that formed the backbone of the Hail archetype. In addition, Gastrodon's Storm Drain kept Chandelure safe from getting its flame snuffed out. This This team was popular among Japanese players online, as well as in several other tournaments in the West, where it was popularized by players such as Cassie, Huey Ha, and Matthias Dreykhoff Gower. Cassie managed to make top 64 at Nationals, while Dreykhoff placed first in Europe in the online VGCS Winter Battle. Dreykhoff in particular fell in love with Chandelure, and while he more frequently used Jellicent for slow matchups, Chandelure's ability to completely nullify and use opponents' attacks against them could make for some especially quick victories. Chandelure on this build typically carried a Focus Sash to ensure its survival, which might seem at odds with Hail, but mostly required intelligent play and could be managed by running Chandelure in the front and Abomasnow in the back. Bjorn Igonho Vizers also ran a non-Trick Room variant of Abomasnow Chandelure to make top 16 at the world's last chance qualifier, with his Chandelure carrying a Fire Gem for maximum power. 2012 also saw Rushan Firestorm Khan debut his Slow King based Chandelure Trick Room team, which used a Focus Sash to guarantee Trick Room setup and acted as a check to grass types that threatened Slow King and Gastrodon. Rushan also made top 16 at the world's LCQ, and he'd use this same build in future years, so stay tuned. However, Chandelure's greatest successes in 2012 were actually flipped as opposed to 2011. It was with Choice Scarf